this is Reporter's Take. I'm Sakshi Batra, and with me is my colleague Kamalika Ghosh, and we are here to discuss about how the cut in corporate taxes can really help the government bridge the fiscal deficit gap. Thanks a lot, Kamalika, for joining in. Now, we all have been talking about it immensely and discussing on Moneycontrol as well as to how the cut in corporate taxes can, benefit the industry, also improve the earnings, as well as also help in kicking in the private investments. But there has been one major concern, and that is the risk to the fiscal situation. So, Kamalika, could you help all our viewers also understand what kind of risk gets posed to the fiscal situation of the country due to these corporate tax cuts? Also, what are your sources really telling you about how the government can really bridge the fiscal deficit because of them as well?
So, Sakshi, as the government announced last week that it's going for a corporate tax rate reduction, in a bid to kickstart growth in a slowing economy. So, on that basis, what happened is the government has also announced that it is undertaking a 1.45 lakh crore burden on its revenues. So this could also translate to a 70 basis point effect on the fiscal deficit of the country, which would mean that the fiscal deficit of the country could go up to somewhere around 4% from the budgeted 3.3% of the GDP. Now, what happens is, like we've discussed, that a lower corporate tax rate means that the private sector kickstarts its investment and its profitability increases. We have to also remember that these public sector enterprises also pay a considerable amount of money to the government as dividends. So when there is a reduction in corporate tax rate, what happens is these public sector enterprises also has a lot of money in their hands, which could mean that that the amount of dividend that they transfer to the government could go up, like some of my sources were expecting. Even experts are of the opinion that more funds with the public sector enterprises would also mean a bigger amount to the government as dividends.
So what you mean to say is that higher dividends can be expected by the government from these public sector enterprises, just because corporate taxes or the lower corporate taxes will help put more money in their hands as well.
Correct. So what happens is in this year's budget, if we go through the budget documents, the government has estimated around 57,487 crore as dividends from these public sector enterprises. So now that the government has announced a reduction in the corporate tax rate, these enterprises could, transfer a slightly bigger amount to the government, which then can be used to bridge the fiscal deficit gap as well. So this figure it's also this cut could also mean that these public sector enterprises, they also, you have to also remember, pay an amount to the government as a dividend distribution tax. So this dividend distribution tax could also considerably go up when there is a corporate tax rate cut, because that would mean that they could give more to its shareholders in terms of dividends and get a and thereby giving back the government a bigger amount in terms of dividend distribution tax.
Absolutely. So a higher dividend and a higher dividend distribution tax is what the government can expect due to these lower corporate taxes that the government has really announced last week. So Kamalika, lastly, just tell me, will higher DDT and higher dividend that is being expected right now and being anticipated by all analysts, can this really help the government meet its 3.3% fiscal deficit target of the GDP?
Well, Sakshi, like my sources have also said, and like analysts also believe, that there would be a fiscal slippage. There is no doubt about that. But these amounts, these kinds of fundings from other sources could help the government to cover its fiscal deficit situation considerably. We've also got to remember that the government also has, the RBI has recently announced a huge amount of money, which is 1.76 lakh crore in terms of dividends to the government. And the government has still not announced how it plans to utilize this funds. So these funds together, even we need to also realize that the divestment process would be kickstarted, and the government would also want greater, funds through its various stake sale. So these kinds of methods of getting more funds could actually considerably cover the government's fiscal position, not completely, as the experts have also said, there would be a slippage, but it would be
it will not be as bad as 4%. So that is like a big relief for sure. Thanks a lot, Kamalika, for sharing all these thoughts there. So definitely a big move over there. There was an anticipation that the fiscal situation could get worse because of these cut in corporate taxes. But on the other hand, when we've spoken to and when Kamalika has spoken to all the analysts and government experts as well, they believe that extra funds in the hands of PSEs or the public sector enterprises can help them transfer more funds to government in ways of DDT and in ways of dividend as well. So that could really help the government bridge the fiscal deficit gap. Thanks a lot for joining us in this edition of Reporter's Take, and do stay logged on to moneycontrol.com for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.